my session, I will match every donation dollar for dollar up to $500.
That's cool.
Let's
Thank
do
you
it.
so much.
You have to do it, but you have to say it's for the cats because I don't give any money to dogs. I only give money to cats. So I need the cat people to come in, but I will match every donation dollar for dollar up to $500.
Kyle, also are very known, and everyone knows you like not only Lauren Ipsum guy, but also the one who tests everything. You even have this test patent, and we'll discuss it further on. And you always discuss some innovative technologies or some interesting tests during your talks, including in Chiang Mai. And one of them I tried to implement myself when you said that you can try using Google Ads for one of your keywords that the page is ranking for, but not high enough. And that might push it a bit higher. And so I tried it on 5 pages on one of the websites, but nothing happened. So yeah, I only like spent money for the ads, and it didn't result in me ranking even 1 point higher. What did I do wrong? So what didn't I take into account, or how can I make it work for myself, for example?
I called Google about this, and they said they don't like you. So they that was the main problem. That was it. So the pages that I showed were pages that are indexed, but they're not doing anything. Almost like a shadow ban, like a page that it's there and it exists, but it's not moving. And for those pages, it works. So I think what I showed in that test is that you can use it definitely for indexing, kind of getting pages to show up. Now, I've done it in what you're talking about, like maybe we can move a little bit. And a bunch of people have contacted me since I showed that test and say they've done that. They've had some success moving it up, but I can't guarantee you're going to move from page 2 to page 1. We're going to move out of all. But what I feel good about is using this as a form of those pages that they exist, but they don't. Like they're in the index, but for whatever reason, they're not ranking for anything. So I think use it for pages that kind of need that indexing boost. And those are the ones that I think this technique can be most successful for.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've got this patent here. It's real. So it's the real patent by Kyle Roof, registered in 2020 and with expiration date on 2037. Why did you do that? Why did you decide to go and register a patent like that?
So initially, this was a marketing stunt. That was the only reason it was done, was for marketing. I was working with Dory Friend, and we were doing SIA together, which was a testing group. And she was like, "Hey, and she has a couple of patents, and she was like, "Hey, let's apply for a patent, and we can say that this is patent pending," in terms of like the methodology that was done. And I think we applied in like 2017, 2016, somewhere around there. And then it was actually approved in 2020, which was shocking to everybody involved. like we weren't expecting it at all, but it was initially done as just a marketing move more than anything, to be like, these test methods are pending, and it turned out they got patented. Now I have to say, I feel like I patented fire. Like I'm not entirely sure if I were to try to sue somebody that this patent would hold up, but I enjoy having it. I'm very happy that I have it. It's very, very cool, but I'm not exactly sure if I could apply it anywhere or protect it in any way.
That was my second question. Like, there are a cohort of SEOs who follow Google's patents, read them a lot and try to see their hidden secrets.
Right.
Do you think Google applies any of their patents? Are they applicable to search? Can we rank using that patent?
Absolutely not. I think the number that I heard was that Google has 5,000 patents, something like that. And there's no chance that they are applying all of those. And simply because they have the technology doesn't mean they're using the technology. I would imagine they're using some of them, but there's no chance that they're using all of those. I think in one sense you're protecting technology. So it's the technology they have, they understand, they're going to try to protect that. On the other hand, I can see them doing things as just a bit of a red herring, that people can chase their tails a little bit, and and follow what's going on. So I think the technology exists. They're certainly not using them. And I would also point out, if they have two methods of doing something, one way that's super cool and neat, but is expensive to do, and another way to do it that is, pretty straightforward and much more cost effective, and the results are about the same, they're going to take the cheaper the cheaper method. Yes, for cats, for sure. They're going to take the cheaper method, So even if they have the technology and it could be, marginally better, if they can do it in a way that is much more cost effective, that's the way they're going to do it. Because at the end of the day, they're trying to make money. So they need to keep it as cost effective as possible. And I think the way that they have been doing it, and the way that they will probably continue to do it for a while, is the way that's probably not that fancy patent. Because I think that's just how they go about doing business.
We have a question from Bibi. Bibi wants to make an affiliate site. Let's believe that. What is a good and easy niche?
A product that nobody knows about yet. There you go.
How to find
then,
this niche?
then you will own the whole search. Something that I'm actually, I think, genuinely bad at is finding niches. I don't think that's my special skill at all. A lot of people talk about like, you know how to rank websites, you know how to do things really well. But something that I've really never figured out is like finding a niche. And that's not my special skill at all. And so I don't have a lot of affiliate sites because I don't think I'm good at that. I think I'm good at putting strategy together. I'm good at finding answers. I'm good at putting things together for a long-term plan. But finding a niche and working a site is something that I don't think I'm really good at. And it's something that I don't really do.
Okay. There is an interesting remark from Dixon Jones. How many Google's patents do you think would stand up for really challenge? And in the UK, you cannot patent math.
I think you can patent math if you write it so difficultly that the patent guy looks at it and is like, all right. Because that's all it comes down to. It's like some patent person has to look at it and be like, looks unique enough. I think you can get anything patented, to be honest. How many patents do I think they're using? I don't really know. I think Quora said he's read 3,000 of those patents. And that's a stag. I don't think I've read enough books to Have you ever read a patent? Have you looked at a patent? They're absurd. They're impossible to read. They're wildly difficult. They're very long. It has to be just a handful that they're really using. 50, 70, 100, something like that. Is it like what's actually really in play when you look at the total corpus of 5,000 existing patents?
What do you think about the future of the search? What if there are no search left in how we know it, but there are only AI assistants? What will we do if that happens as SEOs?
As long as there's a computer producing the results, as long as there's an algorithm producing the results, there will be SEO. The only time that goes away is if there are actual humans that are curating the results. But if it's a computer, that computer algorithm is based on math, and that's what we have now, there will be optimization. So we will always exist so long as a computer is the one that is generating the results. As soon as we're in trouble is if they have some army of humans that can pick out the actual best results. But I don't see that ever happening. And as a result, I don't see SEO ever dying. We might pivot, things might change a little bit. We might have different search engines or different things to do. But as long as it is math-based, as long as there's a computer that is making these choices, there will be optimization. And if there's optimization, there's search engine optimization. That's where SEOs come in. So that will always exist so long as a computer is doing the work. And I don't see it becoming, an army of humans anytime soon. So I think we're going to be okay. And actually, when you think about the results right now, when you have like kind of those AI extra features, like kind of bonus featured snippets, if you will, I see that as two levels of optimization. First, to get into that top 10, and second, to get into those areas. So as an SEO, I see that's more opportunity. That's more work, to get into optimize for this and optimize for that. That might be a little extra work that we can do. And as SEOs, we might make a little more money.
What do you think it is better to focus on in 2024 in terms of SEO? And it was one of the questions people asked in the form that we submitted before from Maria. What would you suggest to do now? Because it's kind of uncertainty and everything's evolving and changes so fast, and it's not clear how everything will go. So what should a person in SEO focus? Because we just cannot do everything,
I reject the premise a little bit that everything is changing so quickly or everything changes so much, because in my experience, as I say things, the core part of SEO does not change that much. If you think of like a bell curve, that 80% in the middle of the bell curve really doesn't change. It's like that 10% on either side That's what changes, and that's often going after people that are trying to game, the algorithm, and that's really where they're at. But that middle core part does not change all that much, and it can't change because that creates the results that they have. They can't make huge fundamental changes to that core part because the results are there. And to be perfectly honest, people like the results. The only people that complain about the results are the people watching this. SEOs are the ones that complain. Ask your parents or your grandparents or your aunts and your uncles how they search, and what do they're fine. I live in Thailand. My dad actually came for a visit about a month ago, which was really, really nice. And I asked him what he thought about like the new features that are showing up. And he was like, "What new features? What are you talking about?" Like he's completely unaware like that there's anything new going on in Google. He goes into Google, he types in what he needs to know, and he gets the answers that he's looking for, and he's quite happy with that. So as a result, Google's not going to change it that much. There's no incentive for them to change it that much because the people that complain are us, and that's it. But the people that are actually using Google are pretty happy with the results that they're getting, So that part doesn't change that much. So as a result, as SEOs, we don't need to run around that, the sky is falling and all this change is happening. If you understand kind of the base is going to be there, and you can work on a framework of how things work and why things work, then you're going to be okay. So for 2024, if you're confused about the why, like if you haven't really worked out that part, why do these things work? Why does this happen? That's what I would focus on, getting that framework together more so than chasing any kind of shiny object or any new anything. I think you're gonna be all right.
I've also been using your tool, of course, for a while, Page Optimize Pro, and in there you have this section for EEAT, authority trust signals. So I assume that you think that there are some signals that can be attributed to that, and that can be measured and that can be improved. Have you tested them separately? Can you share the results of those tests, if any?
So those things are really impossible to test separately. Or I mean, you can test them, but they're not going to move rank. So the things we've looked at, and none of the EAT signals will move you up. But it's the kind of thing that when there's an EAT check, because I don't think it's an if it's going to happen. It's like when there's a check for EAT, if you've covered those things, you essentially maintain your rank. You keep the rankings that you have because you've shown that you're a site that's worthy of being in the index. So the thing about EAT is that you should do those things to make sure that you're a site that will be perceived as trustworthy, and need to do it in a way that is so that a bot can see it. Keep in mind that a human isn't looking at your site and be like, "Oh, this looks pretty trustworthy." In the same way that a human's not going to your office and seeing like, oh, "Okay, you're legit." It's a bot coming through. So what we've done in POP has gone through the signals from the quality rater guidelines that we can see that a bot can find, and we've identified those things, and that's what we're putting into our EAT dashboard. And it's also important to understand that it's never ticking one box. It's never like I did this one thing and now I'm good, because it's not. It's kind of ticking enough of the boxes to show that your site should be in the index in the first place. And that's what you want to cover. So as many of those things you can do. I would also point out that real companies don't have issues with EAT, because they're not trying to hide who they are. Sites that have problem with EAT are usually like affiliate sites because they are actually trying to hide who they are. But if you're an actual business, like what you should think about is like, how can I make myself legitimate? And how you can make yourself legitimate is becoming a real site, becoming a real company. And the more you can do of that, and the more you can present of that, is how you can then avoid any EAT type issues.
How do I test? For example, I decide to test something, but there's so much volatility. This update, that update. Some updates are part of the systems, and reviews update now is part of review system or something like that. How do I approach the testing at all? Is there any possibility for single variable tests left or anything?
Yeah, I do them all the time. They still all totally work, and like running pages in lorem ipsum still works. You can do English ipsum if you'd like. But you can, usually the problem that people have with testing is that they have this concept, or maybe like a technique or a thing, and it's this big. What you need to do is kind of narrow it down to what is that actual thing that is moving the needle. What's that actual thing that is the important factor here? And that's what you need to try to conceptualize down to. And if you can get it down to that one thing, then that is always testable. You can always test down to one thing. Some things are easier than others, of course, but often people get kind of overwhelmed with the testing idea because they're thinking like, I need to test this, but you don't, not really. Like, what are you actually looking at? What's the thing that might be moving the needle? And if you can get down to that, then it's still all very, very testable.
And how do you interpret the results? For example, you are doing some tests. Sometimes it's not the test itself, but how you approach the interpreting the results you get from it, and what you attribute this or that result to. And because in the niches, different niches, you can have different results on the same variable,
Yep.
and there are also some variables that only play out in complex, only together, for example. So they don't work in separate, but they work only like to how to do that. Is there like some management system on how to manage this all and interpret the results correctly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are two parts to that. One is tests need to be repeatable, meaning you can do it again. Doing it one time doesn't really mean all that much. You need to do it a few times to be statistically relevant. It needs to be 95% on its p-value, and so that takes getting something right 6 times in a row, between 5 and 6 times in a row. So repeating a test that many times can give you that confidence that what you've done then is something that is real. You can fast forward that though if you can test in the inverse. So if you do something one way and you get the result, and then if you do the test in the inverse and get the opposite result, I think you can fast forward on that and you feel really good about the results you're getting. The extra part of that is then being public about your test and showing what you're doing and making sure that people can try the test again in order to validate what you've done and give it a go. So kind of either doing tests multiple times and getting the same result, doing tests in the inverse, that gives you a lot of confidence, but then also showing people what you've done, then to talk about this is what it was, this is what we got, and then how we can kind of that peer review part, which there is no academic standard in SEO for anything, but you can talk to professionals and show like, this is what we did, this is how we're doing it, this is how we think we can apply it. And that's where I think you can kind of get into these results and what they actually mean.
But then you are testing everything on synthetic sites, for example, with not so much traffic. But now we know from the Google court these and trial documents that they are using user signals heavily. So when you've tested everything and you roll out that on a live site with some traffic, hopefully, and you might not get these results because of the user signals. How to like connect it together so that you have
that's not entirely true. We run tests on sites that are getting traffic, that are sites that are built for that to do those types of things. But at a minimum, maybe at a baseline, you can say this is what the base level algorithm is. You have to figure the algorithm starts somewhere, and I think with a lot of confidence we can say like this is where the baseline is, and then from there, then you might have your user signals, or you might have this signal or that signal, and whatever it is. That's fine. But we can find where like the things start. This is the floor. And then as keywords get more competitive, as niches get more competitive, as things happen, then other factors might layer in. And I think that's where maybe the user signals might come in. But that's at a much higher level. But at a minimum, we can find like, where do things start? What do we need to do at a beginning to say like, okay, now we know we've given ourselves the best chance to rank this particular. We're doing the things that give us the best opportunity to rank. And I think at a minimum, we can say we can find that point. But to what you're saying though, we can test on sites that are getting some traffic and see those things as well. Testing user signals is extremely hard. I've never seen. I think Rand Fishkin at Moz famously 8 years ago did one on click-through rate, right, where they had everybody click on a particular result and it actually moved up. That is the only test I've ever seen successfully done on any kind of user engagement type signal. After that, though, those tests are extremely hard to do, and it's extremely hard to nail down what actually might be going on with user metrics in a testing environment.
How do you think about these changes recently? We have so many Reddit results now at the top and authoritative websites in the top, and they are pushing niche websites down to the bottom. Is there any way to still win top positions for these smaller websites, small businesses, small niche websites, or is it is it related maybe to some user signals that Google has already accumulated? And if it is, and Google has accumulated these signals for Reddit and for big publishers, how small publishers can accumulate similar signals then if they are already at the bottom? So what should people do with that?
With Reddit and Quora hitting the search results, it's one of the few times where I feel like they directly inserted something, where they did something that feels like they intentionally got those sites into the SERPs, and it caused a lot of problems. I am hoping that some of that rolls back, but that's one of the few times in the decade that I've been doing SEO where you can see something that looks like they really intentionally did that. Like, it wasn't just like we changed our algorithm a little bit and these are the sites showing up. They did something that really seems very intrusive to their algorithm, and that seems extremely short-sighted as something to do. But with a lot of the SERPs, what a lot of it looks like to me is something that you might be playing with like in a local SEO space. There are times when you look at a SERP and there are mixed results with national and local. When you look at those results, almost all the results might be national, and there might be like 2 local spots. And then so from a strategy perspective, you have to realize that you might only have 2 places you can get in that SERP. My site is local, so I might only have actually 2 opportunities in there, and then I'm actually gunning for one of those 2 sites. I see that very similar to what's going on right now. When you look at the SERPs, how many sites on that page are actually sites that look like yours? And then that's going to tell you how many opportunities you have. So before you might have had 4 or 5 spots that you could take, but now you might be down to 1 or 2. So then that's a business decision you need to make. Like, is it worth us going after those 1 or 2 potential spots? That's how I think the mindset has to be. That's been the mindset in local for people that are doing good local strategy. You could honestly look at and say how many opportunities you had to be in that SERP. Same with these types of things. With these other sites that have come in, these other sites that exist, how many opportunities do we have with a site like mine? Do they actually appear in these SERPs? And then there's probably going to be 1 or 2, and then you realize you're only going after 1 or 2 spots. And then you have to kind of make that budget, time, resource decision. Is it worth us to go after because we only have 2 possible or 1 possible spots within these SERPs? That's the evaluation that I would do after this last update.
Monse is asking, what is the one thing to avoid to have a successful test according to your experience?
Anything you do to one test page, you have to do to all of them to feel good about what you're doing. So you're gonna have multiple test pages running for a particular test. It's very tempting to go look at one page. If you go look at one page, you want to look at all of them to make sure you've done the same thing. So you want to keep things as variable free as possible. And so just anything you're doing to one, make sure you're doing to all, except for, obviously for that one thing that you're testing, that's only going to go on one page.
We had a session right before you about the updates, and Barry and Glenn mentioned that they have not seen any recoveries from helpful content updates yet. And you have these testing capabilities, and you have these tools that can track what's happening in the search results. Why do you think is that? And how can people actually leave this? It's not a penalty, but recover from this update. What can they do if no one understands what's happening?
I also haven't seen any recovery from this. I saw some chatter on Reddit the other day that some people were claiming that they're getting some stuff back, but I also have not seen any tangible recovery for any sites that have been massively hit. And that goes for, sites that I know that have done things correctly, sites that have all human written content that's fantastic, they're doing all the right things. They don't have a lot of ads on their site, they've done all the right things and they're still trying to improve. And those types of sites still seem to have been caught up in this update quite unfairly, which is extremely disappointing. But I have not seen any tangible updates or anybody that says that, like, yeah, definitely, I lost 90% and now I'm back. I haven't seen anybody say that they've recovered and shown that they've recovered. So I can't sit here and say that I've got the answers to that, because I don't. I wish I did. I really wish I did. Not so much for myself, but just for the people that, their livelihoods have been really wrecked, which is extremely unfortunate. And it's one of those kind of interesting things where you're kind of like, we live and die by Google, right? We were making so much money, and then all of a sudden one thing like that, when they clearly insert something into the algorithm, ended up harming so many people that are, good business people, and they're all doing it right. It's an unfortunate situation, and I genuinely hope that there's a core update that starts to correct some of this, and I hope that.
Thank you so much, Carl, for all your answers. I have not been able to ask all the questions I had, but I hope we can sometime again in the future. And thank everyone for donating during Carl's session, and continue to do that.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone.